At my graduation dinner, my rich grandma tapped her glass and said, "I'm so proud of how you've handled the $2,750,000 I put aside for you." I just sat there, staring. What, $2.75 million? The room went silent, and that was the moment everything fell apart. I never thought a single toast could shatter my entire life. But the moment those words left her lips, my family's perfect facade crumbled, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. The air in that fancy Chicago steakhouse had been thick with fake smiles and clinking glasses, a forced celebration of my hard-earned master's degree. My parents, David and Sarah, were holding court, acting like they'd earned it themselves, while I sat at the center, trying to smile through an overpriced filet mignon and even more insincere compliments. My name is Liam. And up until a few months ago, I truly believed I came from a pretty normal, if a little loud, upper-middle-class family. We weren't yacht rich, but we certainly never struggled. Nice cars, private school, vacations once or twice a year. Dad worked in commercial real estate, Mom ran a boutique PR firm from our house. I always knew we were comfortable. What I didn't know was that there were layers, deep, ugly layers, hidden just beneath the surface, especially when it came to money, and more specifically, my money. Let me back up a little. Growing up, my grandmother, Eleanor, on my dad's side, was always a bit of an enigma. She was proper to a fault, the kind of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and insisted on a napkin in your lap. Her serene, almost icy politeness made her intimidating to most people. But with me, it was different. In her own quiet way, she liked me. I was the only grandchild who didn't complain about her classical music or the faint smell of lavender and mothballs in her house. We'd play chess, drink tea, and she'd tell me stories about her childhood in London during the war. She wasn't outwardly warm, but she was consistent, dependable. When I was 12, I overheard my mom talking to my dad late one night. She sounded annoyed. "Why does she have to make everything about him?" she hissed. "It's always Liam this, Liam that." My dad replied, "Because he listens. And he doesn't treat her like an antique." Hearing that made me feel oddly proud, like I'd passed some invisible test. But then high school hit, and things began to shift. My younger sister, Brooke, 2 years my junior, was a firecracker. Charismatic, dramatic, always the star of her own show. She had a knack for manipulating a room, especially our parents. And somewhere between her sophomore year and my senior year, she became the undeniable favorite. Suddenly, everything revolved around Brooke. Her dance recitals, her artistic spirit, her heartbreaks over boys she'd dated for 2 weeks. When she got a B in chemistry, it was the teacher's fault. When I got an A in calculus, it was, "Maybe you should have studied harder." At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the favoritism became too obvious to ignore. Still, I kept my head down. I figured it wasn't worth the fight. I got into a good college, worked 2 jobs to cover my expenses, and didn't look back. Grandma Eleanor was one of the few who stayed in touch. She'd write long, neat letters on monogrammed stationery, updating me on her garden and her latest books. She never sent money, just thoughts, advice, and the occasional crossword she couldn't solve. I wrote back every time, even when I was swamped with finals or exhausted from double shifts at the bookstore. Then came grad school. I got a scholarship that covered part of my tuition, and I took out loans for the rest. I remember talking to my parents about it, hoping for a little help, maybe even a small, low-interest loan. But they were strangely cold. "You're an adult now," my mom said. "We've done enough. Time to stand on your own," my dad added. It stung, but again, I let it go. I figured I wasn't entitled to anything, and honestly, I was used to doing things alone by then. Fast forward to my graduation dinner. My parents rented out the private room of a 5-star steakhouse downtown. It had one of those gleaming tables with too many forks, dim lighting, and a sweeping skyline view. My mom, in a sequined black dress, gave me forced smiles like we were posing for a campaign ad. My dad slapped everyone on the back like he'd won something. Brooke, of course, was draped in a designer gown, pretending to be mildly interested while texting under the table. The room was packed with distant cousins, my dad's business partners, family friends. It was excessive. I would have preferred pizza and beer in a backyard, but this was apparently for appearances. I was mid-sip of sparkling water when Grandma Eleanor rose from her seat and tapped her knife gently against her wine glass. The sound was delicate, yet it commanded the room. Everyone turned to look. "I'd like to say a few words," she said, her voice steady and elegant. "Liam, darling, I know you're not one for speeches, but I hope you'll indulge me." I smiled and nodded, not thinking much of it. She raised her glass a little higher. "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. You've worked hard, stayed grounded, and you've always been kind, even when others weren't. That's rare these days. And I'm especially proud of how responsibly you've handled the $2,750,000 I set aside for you all those years ago." The air changed. It was like the room had been holding its breath and suddenly forgot how to exhale. I froze, the glass in my hand halfway to my mouth. The blood drained from my face, and for a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" I managed, my voice barely audible. Grandma Eleanor smiled, mistaking my shock for humility. "Well, you've never been one to brag, but I think it's important to acknowledge your financial wisdom, especially with such a sizable trust fund. You've made me very proud." There was a long, terrible silence. My parents looked like they'd just seen a ghost. Brooke's jaw hung open in a perfectly dramatic O. One of my dad's friends coughed awkwardly. I looked at my grandmother, feeling the room spin. "What trust fund?" I asked. Her smile faded. "The one I set up for you when you were born," she said slowly. "The one I've been contributing to for the past 25 years. The one your parents have been managing on your behalf." And just like that, the silence turned from awkward to deadly. My mom's hand gripped her wineglass so tightly, I thought it might snap. My dad let out a short, tense laugh, trying to play it off. "Oh, Eleanor," he said quickly. "Let's not bore everyone with finances. Let's just enjoy dinner." But it was too late. The room had turned cold. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hands were shaking. I looked from my grandma to my parents and back again, trying to make sense of what I just heard. 2.7 million. And I had never seen a single dollar. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling like a stranger at my own celebration. My mouth went dry. Questions swarmed my brain like angry bees. Where was the money? Why didn't I know about it? What had they done with it? But most importantly, how long had they been lying to me? That was the moment everything began to unravel, and I hadn't even touched dessert yet. I don't remember much about the rest of that dinner. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, staring at the perfectly folded napkin in my lap like it might have the answers. I was aware of people trying to steer the conversation back to safe topics. Someone mentioned the wine. Someone else complimented the fillet. But it all sounded muffled, like I was underwater. Meanwhile, my parents wore tight, forced smiles, and Grandma Eleanor, clearly confused by the reaction, glanced around the table like she'd misread the room entirely. When the waiter came with dessert menus, I excused myself and walked straight to the bathroom. I locked myself in a stall and just stood there, staring at the graffiti on the door, hoping it would somehow help me make sense of any of this. $2.75 million. My name, my trust fund, and I'd never even heard about it. After a few minutes, I texted my best friend, Ethan, "Dude, my grandma just announced at dinner that I have a 2.7 million trust fund. News to me." He responded in all caps, "What, bro? What the actual heck?" I didn't reply. I just sat there, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor, trying to piece it all together. My parents had managed it. That's what she said. So, where was it? When I finally came back to the table, most guests had moved on to dessert. The tension had diffused a little, but not for me. I was locked in, watching. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad was drinking faster than usual. Brooke was typing away on her phone like she couldn't wait to update her group chat. Grandma Eleanor, ever the picture of grace, tried to steer things back to normal. So, Liam, she asked, how's the new apartment? Are you finding the neighborhood safe? I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, my mom cut in. It's fine, she said, waving a hand. It's a starter place, but he'll upgrade eventually. We told him not to overspend. Especially with, you know. She trailed off. I raised an eyebrow. Especially with what? I asked. She flinched, just a little. Oh, nothing. Just, you know, the economy. It's best to be cautious. I didn't push it then, but I knew something was deeply wrong. I could feel it in my chest, like a splinter working its way deeper under the skin. We wrapped up dinner, took a few forced photos, and said good night to the guests. Grandma hugged me tight and whispered, "You've made me proud, darling." Then she was whisked away by her driver, leaving me standing next to my parents in the valet circle, still trying to breathe normally. "Can we talk?" I asked. My mom gave a brittle laugh. "Liam, it's late. Let's not do this here. We can do it at home then," I insisted. "I've got work in the morning," my dad muttered. "We'll talk later." "No," I said, more firmly. "Now." There was a pause. My dad exhaled sharply. "Fine. Brooke, go home. We'll take Liam back with us." She raised an eyebrow. "You serious? This is about the trust thing, isn't it?" "Go," my mom snapped. Brooke rolled her eyes and walked to her car like it was the biggest inconvenience of her life. The ride home was dead silent. I sat in the back seat like a kid again, staring at the back of their heads. My mom fiddled with her phone. My dad's grip on the steering wheel was tight. No music, no small talk, just the low hum of the engine and the thrum of my pulse in my ears. When we got to the house, I walked in first and sat down in the living room. They didn't offer me a drink, didn't take off their coats. They stood across from me like they were about to deliver bad news. "I want the truth," I said. My mom crossed her arms. "Liam, it's complicated." "No, it's not," I snapped. "Did Grandma set up a trust fund for me when I was born?" They exchanged a look. My dad spoke first. "Yes." "Have you been managing it?" "Yes." "And where is it now?" That's when my mom sat down slowly, like her legs had given out. "It's gone," she said. My heart stopped. "What do you mean, it's gone?" "We used it," she said softly. "For what?" "Life," my dad said. "You don't understand the pressure we were under. Private school tuition, the mortgage, your grandmother's medical bills." "She's still alive." I interrupted. My mom's voice rose. "She had surgery last year, Liam, do you think any of that was cheap? And your college? Do you think we just had that money lying around? I took out loans." I yelled. "I worked 2 jobs. You said you couldn't help me." "That's because the money was tied up," my dad said weakly. "We were keeping it for you." "You were stealing it from me," I said. "For years." There was silence. A thick, heavy silence that pressed down on everything. My mom wiped her eyes. "We didn't steal it. We borrowed from it." "Oh, really?" I said, standing up. "So, you can pay it back." "Can you?" Neither of them spoke. I stared at them for a long time, and then I left. I walked out the door, got in my beat-up Civic, and drove back to my apartment. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from Brooke, from my mom, a missed call from my dad. I ignored them all. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, staring at my laptop, trying to understand what had just happened. I Googled trust fund mismanagement. Can parents legally take your trust fund? How to find out where your trust fund is. I read legal forums until my eyes blurred. I found stories of other people who'd had money taken from them by their own families. Some went to court, some didn't. It all came down to documentation, and I had none. The next day, I called Grandma Eleanor. She answered on the third ring. "Hello, dear Grandma," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to talk to you alone." There was a pause. Then she said, "Come by at noon." I showed up early. She was waiting with tea and shortbread, like nothing had happened. "Sit," she said, and I did. I told her everything. To her credit, she didn't interrupt. Just sipped her tea, face calm, but her eyes slowly narrowing as I went on. When I finished, she set her cup down and stood up. She walked into her study and returned with a thick manila folder. "These are the trust documents," she said. I kept my own copies. I opened it with trembling hands. There it was. My name, her signature, the dates, the statements, everything. "And this line," she said, pointing to a paragraph in the middle, "states that your parents were to serve as temporary custodians until you turned 21. After that, you were supposed to be given full access." I looked up at her, stunned. "They never told me." "I know," she said. "You knew?" "I suspected," she said coolly. "When I stopped receiving quarterly updates from the bank, I assumed they transferred the assets. I asked your father about it once, and he brushed me off. I chose to believe the best. I won't make that mistake again." I sat back in my chair, dazed. "What do I do?" I asked. She gave me a long, measured look. "You let me handle it." I should have felt relief. But instead, I felt like the floor had just opened up under me because I knew whatever Grandma Eleanor had planned next, it wasn't going to be pretty, and it was only the beginning. For the first time in my life, I saw Grandma Eleanor angry. Not loud angry. Not theatrical shouting, flailing angry. That would have been easier. No, this was cold, deliberate. Queen of Ice anger. The kind that didn't burn but froze. The kind that didn't shout but whispered, and somehow that whisper made your bones shake. After handing me the trust documents, she spent the next hour making calls. I sat on her couch in a daze, listening as she spoke in calm, clipped tones to banks, lawyers, and a financial advisor named Henry, who sounded like he'd just woken up but instantly snapped to attention when she said her name. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just said things like, "I need a full forensic review of the withdrawals made from my grandson's trust, and if you find evidence of unauthorized transfers, I'll need options for legal recourse." Then she ended each call with a crisp, "Thank you," and wrote everything down in a little leather notebook she kept by the phone. When she finally sat back down beside me, she looked tired, but there was steel in her eyes. "Liam," she said, folding her hands neatly. "I'm going to ask you something important. I need you to be honest." I nodded slowly. "Do you want to go after them?" I blinked. "You mean legally?" She nodded once. I hesitated. My heart was still raw. The betrayal hadn't even begun to scab over yet. A huge part of me wanted to scream yes. Burn everything down, take them to court, expose them in front of the world. But another part, the tired, emotionally gutted part, just wanted to disappear, to be done with it, to start fresh and never speak to them again. "I don't know," I whispered. She didn't push me, just nodded and stood up, pressing a warm hand to my shoulder. "Then take your time, but don't wait forever. People like your parents, they count on hesitation. They build their power in silence. And I didn't raise you to be silent." I nodded, trying to hold back the tears stinging behind my eyes. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I cut off contact with my parents. No calls, no texts, no awkward Sunday dinners. I blocked Brooke after she sent me a string of messages that ranged from, "You're overreacting," to, "Why are you trying to ruin our family," to, "If you sue Mom and Dad, you're dead to me." I wish I could say I stayed strong, that I bounced back immediately and channeled my rage into productivity. But the truth was, I spiraled. I couldn't focus. I stopped job hunting. I stayed up late scrolling through forums about financial mistreatment, reading horror stories that felt all too familiar. My sleep schedule shattered. I lived on cereal and microwaved rice. My student loan statement sat unopened on my desk. I started ignoring my friends' calls, embarrassed that I didn't know how to answer the one question everyone was asking. So, what are you going to do now? I didn't know. I didn't know who I was anymore. Everything I thought I'd earned, my degree, my independence, my pride in having made it on my own, suddenly felt hollow. I hadn't been building my life from scratch, I'd been robbed of the tools I was supposed to have. That trust fund could have changed everything. I could have graduated debt-free. Could have bought a place instead of paying rent to a landlord who didn't fix the heater. Could have invested, started a business, helped my friends, donated to causes I cared about. Instead, I was scraping together $40 for groceries while my parents had apparently been dipping into my inheritance for over a decade. It felt like drowning. But worse, it felt like being held underwater by the very people who were supposed to keep me afloat. And then something shifted. It was slow, almost imperceptible at first. But I remember the exact moment it started. I was standing in line at the post office, waiting to mail a rent check because my landlord was too old school for online transfers. The guy in front of me, late 50s, tan windbreaker, kind eyes, accidentally dropped his envelope. I bent down, picked it up, and handed it to him. He smiled and said, "You look like a sharp young man. What do you do?" The question made me freeze. I didn't know how to answer. Unemployed, betrayed, legally betrayed. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'm an engineer." And it hit me. I was still me. No matter what they'd taken, no matter how deeply they'd lied, I was still the guy who'd earned a double major while working nights. I was still the guy who fixed his friends' computers for free just because he liked figuring things out. I was still the guy Grandma Eleanor believed in enough to set aside millions for. I was an engineer, and no one could steal that from me. I went home that night and made a plan. Step 1. Take care of myself. I started by cleaning my apartment, top to bottom. I bought real groceries, made real meals. I even opened those student loan statements, calculated exactly what I owed, and made a spreadsheet. It was sobering, but also clarifying. I'd been drifting. Now, at least I had a starting point. Step 2. Find a job. I reworked my resume, applied to everything I was qualified for, and even reached out to a few professors for references. One of them, Dr. Leong, my thesis advisor, wrote back immediately and invited me to speak on a panel at an engineering seminar the following week. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," he wrote. "Don't let bad people take that from you." Step 3. Protect my future. I met with Grandma Eleanor's financial advisor, Henry. He was sharp, older, and terrifyingly efficient. "We're gathering statements," he told me. "Once we know how much they withdrew, we can decide whether to press charges, demand repayment, or pursue civil litigation." I swallowed. "And if the money's gone?" He looked me in the eye. "Then we go after the house, the cars, the businesses. If they spent your trust on themselves, we'll claw it back." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice. During this period, I also found myself spending more time with Grandma Eleanor. She invited me over for tea twice a week. We played chess, talked politics. She even showed me old photo albums, sharing stories about her own battles with her family over inheritance, marriage, and independence. I wasn't supposed to go to university, she told me one afternoon, staring at a photo of herself in a black and white cap and gown. My father thought it was a waste of time. But I fought him, and I won. She looked up at me, eyes sharp. "You come from a long line of stubborn people, Liam. Use it." She also insisted on giving me a monthly stipend while the trust investigation unfolded. "Not a handout," she said. "A bridge. Think of it as a rebalancing. They took your head start. I'm giving you a running start." With her support, I was able to accept a job offer at a small but promising tech firm across town. The pay wasn't amazing, but the work was fascinating, and they respected me, valued me. That alone felt like a miracle. I threw myself into it, designing systems, solving problems, feeling like I mattered again. I even started building a little side project of my own, a budgeting app for young adults from unstable family backgrounds. Something I wished I'd had. And slowly, my confidence came back. Not all at once. Not in some movie-style training montage, but piece by piece, day by day. I stopped flinching when I heard my mom's ringtone. I stopped doubting myself when I spoke in meetings. I started making plans real ones for the first time in months. I was still angry, of course, I was. There were nights when the rage flared back up and I found myself pacing the apartment, fists clenched, heart pounding. But there was something else now, something stronger. Purpose. And that purpose only grew stronger when I got a call from Henry one rainy Thursday afternoon. "We found it," he said. "Found what?" "The paper trail. Your parents withdrew nearly $1.8 million over the past decade. Most of it funneled into private accounts, luxury purchases, and get this, Brooks College Fund." My throat went dry. "They paid for Brooks School with my trust fund?" "Among other things," he said grimly. "Vacations, renovations, a new BMW registered in your father's name. There's a clear pattern of misappropriation." I was silent for a long time. Then I said, "What are my options?" And Henry, bless his calm, legal soul, said, "You've got plenty." I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, but because for the first time, I was excited. Not to destroy them, but to reclaim what was mine. And maybe, just maybe, show them that their biggest mistake wasn't stealing from me. It was thinking I wouldn't fight back. And that fight, it was about to begin. I always thought revenge was about fire, about rage, heat, the thrill of tearing everything down. But when it finally came time to act, it didn't feel fiery at all. It felt cold, methodical, focused. I wasn't looking to destroy my family in some dramatic public spectacle. No, I wanted precision. I wanted truth. I wanted them to look me in the eye and understand exactly what they'd done, down to the last cent. And I wanted them to know that I was the one pulling the strings now. That the kid they thought would stay quiet, stay small, stay manageable, wasn't playing by their rules anymore. But first, I had to play it smart. Henry helped me put together a timeline, a forensic breakdown of every transaction they made from the trust over the last 10 years. With Grandma Eleanor's original documents and the updated banking records, we traced a full $1.82 million that had been spent without authorization. They'd made themselves the custodians of my future, and then spent it like it was their vacation fund. The real kicker, nearly $400,000 had gone toward Brooke. Tuition, study abroad, even a $15,000 art grant listed under something called the Lillian Creative Exploration Fund, a nonprofit my mother apparently registered in her own name. She created a fake foundation? I asked Henry, horrified. He nodded. Looks like it. The only beneficiary was Brooke. It's textbook laundering. And that was when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It wasn't even just theft. It was calculated. They hadn't stumbled into this. They hadn't borrowed a little here and there and lost track. No, they built a whole system to drain me dry while keeping me clueless. The college loans, the financial shutout, the guilt tripping, it was all part of the same quiet, ugly machine. I was done waiting. The first person I reached out to was Brooke. Not to yell, not to vent. I needed her to confirm what I already suspected. I waited until she posted on Instagram some smug photo of her posing in a rooftop pool with the caption, "Manifesting good vibes only sparkles," and then called her. She answered on the third ring. "Well, look who finally unblocked me," she said, voice full of sugar and steel. "I need to ask you something," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Did Mom and Dad ever tell you where your college money came from?" She laughed. "What? Is this a quiz? I thought this was about the trust fund thing. Are you still sulking about that? Answer the question." She paused, clearly taken off guard by my tone. "I don't know," she said finally. "They said they had savings. That grandma helped. Maybe. Grandma never paid for your school, I said. That money came from my trust fund. Silence. You're lying, she said. But her voice cracked just enough to tell me she wasn't sure. I have the paperwork, I replied. Bank statements, legal records. Mom created a fake grant to funnel the money. Another pause, longer this time. You think I knew, she snapped. I think you never asked. She hung up. That was fine. I wasn't looking for closure from her. But what I had gotten was confirmation. She didn't know, which meant my parents had kept even her in the dark about just how deep the theft ran. That gave me a powerful advantage. The second step was gathering my allies. Grandma Eleanor was already in my corner. Henry, too. But I needed someone who understood the emotional terrain, the way my parents operated when backed into a corner. That's when I reached out to Aunt Martha. Martha was my dad's younger sister. She lived in a small town in Vermont, taught literature at a liberal arts college, and had always been the family's black sheep. When I was a kid, she'd show up to Christmas dinners wearing combat boots and quoting Audre Lorde. She and my dad had fallen out years ago over some money thing, but I never knew the details. When I called her out of the blue, she didn't hesitate. Sweetheart, she said. If this is about money and your parents, I'm already listening. We met for lunch at a quiet Italian place halfway between our cities. Over steaming bowls of pasta, I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once, just listened, her brow furrowing deeper with every detail. When I finished, she set down her fork, wiped her mouth, and said, "They did the same thing to me." What? When I was 21, she said. Dad set aside a small inheritance for me. Nothing close to yours, but enough to help me buy a condo. I never saw a dime. They convinced me it got eaten by taxes. I didn't have the documents to prove otherwise. I stared at her. Why didn't you ever say anything? I did. Your grandmother didn't believe me, or didn't want to. I think part of her couldn't imagine her son doing something like that. She leaned forward. I believe you, Liam, and if you want to go after them, I'm in. I swallowed hard. I do, but I want to do it clean, controlled, not some messy lawsuit in the tabloids. Martha smiled. Then, let's make a plan. We started small. Aunt Martha dug up old family emails, holiday letters, anything with timelines that contradicted their story. Meanwhile, I met with Henry every week to tighten the legal noose. We drafted a formal demand for restitution, complete with itemized withdrawals, signature mismatches, and proof of forged authorizations. I was getting ready to send it when something unexpected happened. I got an email from my father. Subject, let's talk. Liam, your mother and I have been thinking about everything that's happened. We'd like to have a calm, respectful conversation. No lawyers, just family. We're willing to discuss ways to make things right. Please let us know when you're available. Love, Dad. I stared at the message for a long time. It was classic damage control. They'd heard from someone, probably Brooke, that I was digging, and now they were trying to get ahead of it, to control the narrative, to spin it into a misunderstanding. I didn't reply. Instead, I invited them to brunch. Neutral territory, public, controlled. I chose a quiet place with big windows and a strict no-phone policy. I asked Grandma Eleanor to attend. She agreed without hesitation. And when Sunday morning rolled around, I walked into that cafe with a folder full of evidence, a quiet fury in my chest, and a plan. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to reveal. They arrived 10 minutes late. My mom in pearls and a designer blazer. My dad in his, I'm a good guy, casual suit. Both of them wearing polite, brittle smiles like they were stepping into a negotiation. They didn't expect Grandma Eleanor to be sitting next to me. Her presence threw them off immediately. Mother, my dad said stiffly. I'm here to listen, she replied. And to watch. We ordered coffee. Small talk was attempted. I didn't bite. Finally, I opened the folder and slid it across the table. This is a forensic record of every dollar withdrawn from my trust, I said, along with copies of the original documents stating that I was to be given full access at 21, not 25, not never. My dad opened his mouth. I raised a hand. Don't. Just look. They read in silence. When they got to the part about the fake foundation, my mom paled. You were never supposed to find this, she whispered. Yeah, I said. That's kind of the theme here. My dad looked up. We can pay some of it back over time. I'm not here to negotiate, I said. I'm here to inform you of your options. My voice didn't shake. Not once. You can agree to a full repayment schedule with interest, or we go to court. If you fight me, I'll subpoena the foundation records, your tax returns, everything. I'll prove Brooke's education was funded through fraud. I'll go public if I have to. This ends one of two ways. With dignity or with exposure. Silence. My mom looked like she might faint. My dad was sweating through his collar. Grandma Eleanor leaned forward. I told you when Liam was born, she said coldly. That money was a sacred promise. You broke it. Then she stood and walked out. I followed a minute later, leaving the folder behind. They had all the information. Now the clock was ticking. Back at home, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was still work to do. But I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't playing defense. I was making moves, carefully, quietly, and with purpose. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about truth, about ownership, about setting the record straight. And whatever they chose next, whether to fight or fold, it wouldn't change the outcome. Because the setup was done, and the final act, it was coming. They didn't answer for 3 days. Not a word, not a text, not a weekly written email trying to minimize what they'd done. Just silence. And honestly, that silence spoke volumes. My parents, people who had micromanaged my life, talked over me, dismissed me, taken from me, were suddenly, gloriously quiet. I knew that meant one thing, they were scared. And they should have been, because I wasn't bluffing. On the 4th day, Henry filed the official demand for restitution with our attorney's letterhead, backed by over 100 pages of documented evidence. We sent it to their house by certified mail. A week later, we received their lawyer's reply. It was a clumsy, thinly veiled attempt to settle. They offered to repay $500,000 over 10 years without interest, contingent on me signing a non-disclosure agreement. We rejected it in under an hour. They tried again, this time raising it to $750,000, still with an NDA. I didn't even dignify that one with a response. Then came the threats. I got an email from a second lawyer, different firm, same tone, implying that I was damaging the family's reputation and that my case lacked sufficient legal standing. I sent it straight to Henry. He replied with one line, "They're bluffing. Let's go to court." But before we filed the civil suit, I pulled the one lever I knew they weren't expecting. I went public, not with a press conference, not some angry social media rant, just one clean letter. I wrote it carefully. No names, no vulgarity, just truth. I posted it on a well-trafficked legal advice forum and a financial mistreatment subreddit. The post was titled, "My Parents Spent My $2.7 million Trust Fund Without Telling Me. Here's how I'm getting justice." It went viral within 24 hours. Tens of thousands of upvotes. Comments from lawyers, survivors, estranged kids. People shared their own stories, some hopeful, many heartbreaking. But the response was overwhelmingly on my side. And then the story caught traction outside Reddit. A journalist from a mid-tier finance blog messaged me, asking to do a piece. I agreed anonymously at first, but by the time it published, I was past the point of shame. I wanted my story out there. The article didn't name my parents. It didn't need to. Anyone who knew them knew it was them. 2 days later, Brooke called me. "You humiliated them," she spat. I stayed quiet. They can't show their faces at the club. Dad lost a client. Mom hasn't left the house. You think I care? You've destroyed our family. No, I said. They did. I'm just shining a light. She hung up. I haven't heard from her since. The civil suit was filed 1 week later. It made waves in our community. My dad's real estate network whispered. My mom's boutique clients evaporated almost overnight. No one wanted to be associated with someone accused of defrauding their own son. The discovery phase was brutal for them. Their financial records revealed everything. The BMW, the Hawaii trips, the tuition payments disguised as educational consulting, the trust fund disbursements laundered through shell accounts. It was all laid bare. We offered one last settlement, full repayment of the $1.82 million plus 4% annual interest compounded over 10 years. No NDA. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue criminal charges or tax fraud investigations. They refused. So, we went to court. The trial lasted 3 days. I testified, calm, direct, no theatrics. I brought the trust documents, the banking records. Grandma Eleanor's notarized affidavit. Aunt Martha even flew in to testify about what they'd done to her. My parents didn't testify. Their lawyer tried to paint it all as a misunderstanding, said they were just trying to help me by managing the money responsibly. The judge didn't buy it. His verdict was swift and scathing. He ordered them to repay the full amount with interest within 120 days. He froze their assets, placed liens on their properties, and referred parts of the case to the state's tax fraud division for potential criminal investigation. They left the courtroom gray-faced and shaking. I walked out into the sun. The fallout was slow but absolute. Their house, my childhood home, was listed within a month. So was the lake cabin they bought in 2017 with money they never should have touched. The country club revoked my father's membership quietly, without fanfare. My mom's PR firm shuttered after her last 2 clients pulled out. The once perfect image they curated for years, successful, classy, respectable, crumbled under the weight of what they'd done. As for Brooke, I heard she dropped out of grad school. Apparently, when the truth came out about how her scholarship had been funded, she lost access to her university's financial aid. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I just moved forward. With the restitution finally in my hands, every sin accounted for, I did 3 things. First, I paid off every loan I had. School, car, medical, gone in a day. The feeling of logging in and seeing zeros across the board was surreal. Second, I donated $100,000 to a nonprofit that helps young adults escape financial mistreatment. I included a note for everyone who was never believed. You are not alone. Third, I started my own business. The budgeting app I'd built during my lowest months. I launched it for real, hired a small team, invested in development. Within 6 months, we hit our first milestone, 10,000 users. I named the company First Light. Because that's what it felt like, stepping out of a long, cold night into something new. Grandma Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep the following spring. She left me her estate. I stood at the graveside in a tailored suit she once bought me for interviews, clutching the last letter she wrote. It was short, handwritten in blue ink on her usual monogram stationery. They were never worthy of you. I hope you never let them dim your light again. You were always the best of us. Eleanor. I kept that letter in my wallet for a long time. Still have it, folded and worn. A reminder of who I was and who I became. All those years I thought my parents were the architects of my life, that I had to bend around them, please them, survive them. But in the end, they taught me the most valuable lesson of all. That freedom comes when you stop asking for permission and start taking back what was always yours. What would you have done if your own family did this to you?